On a misty and rainy day of 1936, students in Taipei were lined up in front of the Governor General's office to be reviewed by Governor General Seizo Kobayashi. Kobayashi, a Naval Reserve admiral, was the 17th Governor General of Taiwan. After 9 civilian Governor Generals, Taiwan entered the period of military administration again. Kobayashi pushed 3 major policies to rule Taiwan, respectively Kominka, industrialization, and southward expansion of bases. Its core was Kominka. In the 1930s, with Chiang Wei-shui's death and the fading of the nationalist movement in Taiwan, on Dada Cheng's Guida Street, there were no fighters of the Cultural Association at the Gangting Cultural Lecture, giving passionate speeches. What followed was the popular songs. They started flourishing. In a small attic around the corner of Guida Street, there lived a staff member of the Yonglezuo Theater, Li Linqiu. He was a descendant of migrants from Anxi, Fujian. Due to declining family fortune at his young age, he didn't finish school. When he turned 16, he became a tea service boy at the Yonglezuo Theater. With his interest in Chinese classical poetry and the influence of the theater atmosphere for years, Li Linqiu's lyrics talent began to bud. In 1933, 24-year-old Li Linqiu wrote a song and gave it to the new composer, Taoyuan Hakka Deng Yuxian. Deng Yuxian quickly composed a song and selected Taiwan's first pop singer, Chun Chun, to sing it. This song, Longing for the Spring Breeze, quickly swept the island, expressing the love of a young girl vividly. However, for different Taiwan folks in different situations, through the mellow and indirect lyrics, this song could express their different feelings. In the southern tip of Taiwan, Hengchun, Cape Eluanbi, which borders the Bashi Channel, along with the towering lighthouse, constitute one of the most beautiful sceneries in Taiwan. Cape Eluanbi, built in 1881, used to be the southernmost landmark in Taiwan. In 1935, Li Guilan was 16 years old, the right age of longing for the spring breeze. Her father, Li Yawan, was doing ox cart business in Hengchun walled city with decent income. One day at the end of 1935, Li Guilan, who had never traveled far, with her money saved for years, quietly left home and set out on her dream journey.
那妈妈还有一个疯狂的故事啦哈，她在16岁的时候跟好朋友一起到了访寮，然后搭车到台北去看那个博览会。
What attracted Li Guilan was this expo, which was held in the 40th year of the Japanese rule. It was named Taiwan Exposition of the 40th anniversary of the initiation of administration. The scale of this exposition was magnificent. It opened on October 10th for a period of 50 days, with nearly 1.27 million visitors. The purpose of this exposition was clear to boast the success of colonial rule. At the Taoshan venue, Li Guilan wore a beautiful dress and took this glamorous photo shoot. She enjoyed so much and was reluctant to leave.
她去了1个礼拜哈，回来的时候听说被我阿嬷骂死了，说哇你去了花那么多钱啊。
Following the expo, this documentary titled Southward Expansion into Taiwan began shooting in 5 states and 2 tings over the island. It was filmed with the support of the Governor General's office and was positioned as a promotional film for the national policy of southward expansion. The economic achievements of Japan's 40-year rule of Taiwan were shown in all aspects.
日本要台湾，它本来就是要你台湾作为一个南进的基地，它不是只有要台湾而已，它要整个拓展啊。那所以他拿到你之后，他为了达到这个目的，他要建设你啊。当然，他最主要的目的还是为了日本帝国。
As explained in the beginning of the film, the purpose of producing this film is not only to introduce Taiwan to the world, but also to let the world know that our Japanese nation has increased its population by 1 million each year, and its natural resources have been exhausted. We are confined in a very small island. However, not only Japanese immigrants, but also Japanese goods are being rejected by the world. In order to break this situation, we have to build a strong defense line in the north. And we must further develop an industrial and economic lifeline in the south. So what holds an important place in our heart? It is Taiwan. Taiwan can be said as an important foundation for the empire to extend southward. At the Hengchun Eluanbi Lighthouse, the footage of Japanese officials looking southward was symbolic and was featured prominently in the film. In 1936, a 22-year-old rural youth named Yu Baosheng graduated at the top of his class from Hengchun Public School and won the Prefecture Chief Award.
尤宝生是一个贫苦的孩子，小学毕业而已，因为他脑筋非常好，字又不错，当时被推荐到军医所去上班。
Upon graduation, he got a job at the county office. He was quite outstanding. Also this year, 17-year-old Li Guilan was referred to the prefecture magistrate's residence as a domestic helper. Both worked under the eyes of the prefecture magistrate, where Li Guilan and Yu Baosheng started knowing each other. It was a perfect match between these two young lovers. They got married 2 years later. A rich man's daughter had married the poor peasant family's kid. The former was obviously optimistic about Yu Baosheng's potentials and bright future. This young couple spent very good time together. 55-year-old Lin Qiantang was in his bleak period of life. Since his youth, he devoted himself to the nationalist movement in Taiwan. After over 2 decades of repeated failures, Lin Qiantang gained wide popularity in Taiwan.
日本人其实对他是既笼络又压迫，他一直处在这样的一个困境当中。好的，那1936年。
In 1936, Taiwan Xinmin newspaper, headed by Lin Qiantang, organized a South China tour. After visiting Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Xiamen, they arrived in Shanghai in mid-March. On March 20th, Shanghai Overseas Chinese Federation hosted a banquet in the YMCA building to welcome Lin Qiantang and his party.
林献堂作为代表来致辞，他说：“我这番回到祖国。”那么这一句话传回台湾，那就不得了了。
The newspaper of the Governor General's office, Taiwan Daily News, launched a spontaneous attack on Lin Qiantang.
他说：“台湾人，你们现在是日本统治啊，你们的祖国应该是日本，你怎么说这番回到祖国？”
It was the time that the influence of Japanese militarism was extremely inflated. The chief of staff of the Taiwan army, Ri Beogisu, decided to take this opportunity to punish Lin Qiantang as a warning to others.
他们就找了一个日本极右翼的大日本生产党，一个像流氓一样叫麦间善兵卫。
On June 17, 1936, the initiation of Administration Day of Japanese ruling, a garden party was held at Taichung Park.
这个园游会上，一碰到林献堂，这个麦间善兵卫不由分说就打他一个巴掌。
在那个年代可以说林献堂他走到哪里都很受尊敬跟欢迎的我们台湾人啊都说林献堂讲伊是台湾第一个公民，那拍迄个对伊来讲打击嘛足大。
那台湾的百姓对林献堂是相当的一个尊敬的， 那有这种一个侮辱的行动，当然对我们台湾人也是一种侮辱嘛。
During the Japanese occupation, this was the Motherland incident. This incident was included by a Japanese manga artist in his manga history yearbook of 1936. This slap to Linqian Town, in the words of Linqian Town's secretary Ye Rongzhong, marked the beginning of Taiwan's stormy era. Ye Rongzhong wrote, "Even people like Lin with such a prestigious status could not avoid this blow. What else would we expect for our future?" 2 months after the Motherland incident, on August 27, 1936, a member of the Fujian Preparatory Committee of the Nationalist Government, Lien Zhendong, greeted his new boy born in Fujian. The newborn's grandfather, Lien Heng, did not get the chance to see his grandson, as he died of illness in June.
临终的时候，跟我的父亲谈了很多的事情。他知道，中日必将一战，中国人民的这个能够忍耐的这个程度已经到了极限了，势必这个是兵戎相见的，一决生死了。所以呢，这个小孩生出来，男的话就叫连战。这个名字的由来就是如此。
Lien Heng's prediction came true very soon. The following year, on July 7, 1937, the world-shaking Lugo Bridge incident broke out. Japan started a long-planned all-out war of aggression against China. The Chinese army fought back. The nationwide resistance war began. On August 15, 1937, Moto Fuzhou issued a stern warning to the Taiwan people, announcing that Taiwan had entered the wartime system. The Governor General's office established the National Spirit General Mobilization Headquarters on September 30th in the Taipei Public Hall. The National Spirit General Mobilization Conference was held. Aiming at forcibly transforming the minds of Taiwan people, a Kominka movement was launched. The first stage was the National Spirit Mobilization Movement. Seizo Kobayashi compared Kominka to a salt revolution. He tried to cultivate Taiwan people with the qualities as the subjects of the royal empire to follow through the commands of the headquarters and to build Taiwan as a base to attack East China and South China and to fight the Pacific War in the future.
所谓的皇民化运动是以停止报刊中的汉文栏作为标志开始的。皇民化运动第一个方面就是国语运动，所谓的国语运动就是让台湾人来说日语、讲日语，同时呢禁止在那个学校中这个汉语课的这个讲授，这样就达到了一个去中国化的目的。
在日本统治时期呢，他对传统的汉文教育是采取压抑的那个做法，但是当时台湾人社会对汉文还是非常重视，所以当时台湾人对于日文的学习，所谓的国语普及率其实一直停留在20%几，那推动了40年才20几，但是皇民化以后呢，到1941年左右的统计呢，可能已经超过70%以上的台湾的儿童是接受那个日语教育的。
By the end of the Japanese occupation in 1945, this number had reached 90%. This type of household number plate was used to reward households that all family members only spoke Japanese, the so-called national language family.
国语家庭就是说你是已经变成日本人的生活方式。
Based on Japanese journalist Ito Kojiro, the Governor General Office approach to promote the national language could be said was unscrupulous. They even came up with the trick of differential treatment of the national language speaking families and non-national language speaking families in daily necessities rationing.
当时战争时期台湾的生活非常苦，因为所有的经济资源这些都被动员到军事方面包括食物，也是采配给制度配给制度。那如果说你没有加入所谓的国语家庭， 得到的那个食物是非常少哈，要吃一个肉是很难的，很难的。
This documentary, Happy Peasant, was shot in the early 1930s. It was to publicize the large-scale water project Jianan Irrigation Canal, which brought happy life to Taiwan farmers. However, the Tainan countryside shown in the footage was still an image of a traditional Han Chinese village with Han people's labor and living customers maintained. There were old thatched or new tiled houses, all in traditional folk architecture of Fujian and Guangdong styles. To entertain themselves, villagers relied on Chinese musical instruments and Chinese chess. The wedding ceremony of Lin Yaren and Ahua was held in traditional Han people style. The scene that people presented on the wedding were toasting and cheering, all wearing Han costumes. The worship of God for good harvest kept the old ritual. The southern Fujian-style temple was the center of the villagers' assembly. The stage was set up in front of the temple, and a theatrical troupe was invited to perform. Traditional Taiwan opera, especially the Gezai style, was very popular. However, after the Kominka movement started, these activities were viewed as troublesome. The authority required that Kominka penetrate into every detail of islanders' lives, so all Han nationalities' customs were threatened to be abolished. In July 1937, strict restrictions were imposed on Taiwan traditional opera. Gezai plays were banned. They were replaced by this type of Kominka drama or Japanese court play. On November 5, 1938, Seizo Kobayashi at the Governor General's office promulgated the Shinto Shrine Jingu Cannabis and Shinto Shrine Calendar. The religion reformation movement was launched as a major part of the Kominka movement.
所谓的宗教改造呢，就是说以日本的神道教来代替我们中国传统的各种宗教，泯灭台湾人对中华民族这个传统宗教的一个信仰。
Taiwan Han people's house, whether in southern Fujian courtyard style or a Hakka style encircled house, usually follow the customs of the ancestral land to place the ancestor and deity worship desk in the center of the house, called Grandpa and Grandma Hall, or the main hall. The first step of the religion reformation movement was the transformation of the main hall. This was the standard foil style. It was forcibly regulated like this. The ancestors had also become Kominka. What would they think of this in the netherworld? As deities from the ancestral land were removed, instead, Amaterasu took over their places.
阿玛提拉斯阿弥陀佛，天照大神，日本人的天照人，每个家都要供奉。
你若咧拜神明吼，这是个民间的这文化吼。 袂使讲啊，拜甲讲这么咧王爷咧妈祖哈，就是甲因的宗教较同款。
The protectors of Taiwan folks were not able to protect themselves. This internal princely deity of Li family encountered a disaster.
日本人因为因要实施这个皇民政策，要要求着咱这个台湾人来祭拜因的天照大神，所以将这个民间的神像。 拢集体去伫这个赤山龙湖岩遐要来火化，因阵咱礼物千岁嘛去用请去伫遐要准备火化。
Fortunately, the abbot of Chusha Lohuyan Temple, Master Fanshan, was from Chija.
伊伫这个火堆中间发现着咱的礼物千岁，所以将咱的礼物千岁偷偷甲请起来藏的，甲佮送倒来，互咱本僧家。
The prince of the Li family was saved, but the rest of the deities in the flame were not so lucky. Chinese deities were in distress, while Japanese shrines flourished. During the 50 years of Japan's occupation, the Japanese government had built 68 shrines, of which 38 were built in Kominka period. Based on the grand plan of one shrine for each town, there would be over 200 shrines throughout Taiwan. They became social education centers in Taiwan. On February 11, 1940, The Governor General's office announced that people were allowed to use Japanese-style names. So then the name-changing movement was kicked off.
中国人对姓氏非常重视嘛，行不改名，坐不改姓嘛。
However, the General Services Director Ichiro Morioka explained this island is an entire territory of the empire. As islanders, they must act in essence and in form as inlanders without any difference.
用日本姓氏，你的待遇就跟日本人一样嘛，如果是你不愿意改也可以，你就变成二等国民了，因为日本人是一等国民嘛，不同的待遇嘛，所以有的就开始改。
Interestingly, there emerged many Japanese surnames with Chinese wisdom hidden underneath. For instance, Lei to Yutian, Zhang to Gongchan, Zhong to Jinzhong, Lui to Gongxia. The Taiwan Xinmin newspaper reporter Huang Zhou simply changed his name into Huang Zhou is me. The prominent Tsai family of Houlong, Miaoli, changed the surname Tsai into Feng Tian. His name was Tsai Jukan. In his early years, he did business with his father in Japan. He used to be pretty rich, yet was undertaking a special mission. In 1955, the Nationalist Party Central Party History Committee determined that in 1927, at the Imperial Palace, someone secretly copied the Tanaka Memorial to the throne. His name was Tsai Jukan. To conquer the world, China must be conquered first. To conquer China, Manchuria must be conquered first. Tanaka Memorial was the general guideline of Japan's military invasion of China. After the Chinese government obtained the Tanaka Memorial, it was made public when the 918 incident broke out in northeastern China in 1931, exposing Japanese admission to invade China to the world. Tsai Jukan's personal fate took a turn because of the exposure. Not only he was detained by the Japanese government, but his huge fortunes were also confiscated. He became impoverished and returned to his hometown in Houlong, Miaoli.
他说，人都有贫穷的时候，但是节要在。他还教我们要学文天祥跟乐会，这两个是我羡慕他最崇拜的。
This was the family history Tsai Jukan wrote by himself while he was in Japan. In 1943, when he decided to change the surname Tsai into Feng Tian, he rewrote it again. He told his descendants the family ancestors were from Gushu County, Guangzhou, Henan. In the late Ming and early Qing dynasties, the whole family migrated from Henan to Feng Tian. The 22nd generation ancestor came to southern Taiwan.
那先父呢？他就是说，我不是从晋江竹师的丰田那边出来的，所以假如要改的话，就改成丰田两个字，这样也可以记得说我们是从哪里来的，不会忘了魂。家父一直在勉励我们要饮水思源，台湾话叫假规矩拜请桃，就是这样的意思。你要追溯你祖先从哪里来。 你今天有你这个身子是从哪里来？你的从源头哪里来你都不知道，你的灭亡。
Tsai Jukan made it clear that one purpose of writing family genealogy was to ensure the future generations not to forget their roots. Yet the Kuomintang movement was intended to make Taiwan people forget their roots.
不晓得呢，我们祖上是中国人，根本不晓得。像我们这一代呢。 从小的时候就你灌输啊，你是日本人。歌歌每天唱啊，不是经常唱，每天那个朝会就唱歌歌。
小学的迄吼，每一早起就迄个叫做调会，调会是就画口令，画口令，拢要求这学生啊吼，这种精神的，拢精神教育。伊讲活得不是多么活，来日本。 帝国军咯，新民的阿里巴斯，你讲咱大家拢是大日本帝国的新民。
On the Sun flag, students signed with Japanese surnames, which could be seen as a direct result of the Kuomintang movement. It confirmed the statement of Jiro Morioka. The so-called Kominka movement is an undertaking to make the islanders be real Japanese.
把台湾人呢培育成真正的日本人，或是说更像日本人的台湾人。
This was the diligent patriotic youth team deemed by Japanese colonial authorities as the most successful model of the Kominka movement. The team was established in July 1940 by the Governor General's office. They recruited young people across the island, allocating them in 3 centers in Taipei, Taichung, and Tainan for barrack-style trainings. 19-year-old Chen Jinji was recruited to Ushe, Taichung in 1943 to participate in such trainings.
第一站阮去是叫阮伫武社啦，武社第一站伊是训练了要搁训练啦，就是训练6个月啊。第一站要加开这环国公路。
現在武者運転所においては台湾中央横断自動車道路並びに参勤道路の開拓に瞬間など
这饭这一碗，菜一碗呀。我了解是敢若一新建囡仔吼，食袂袂饱。人啊，咧训练伊咪咪试试鸡放菜放着走头着饭，掠咧讲。有诶整到这喙齿，我来接死伊呢，靠是靠无呢，无简单呢。我摆来用这个呢。
After experiencing the village trainings, these youth would return to their home villages to serve as backbones of the Kominka movement and be recruited first in volunteer recruitment for Southeast Asia or South China battlefields.
皇民化最重要的是军事动员。那军事动员，我们后来的很多台籍日本兵的一个投入战场，就是在整个皇民化运动之后，就是说把人民纳入这个总动员体系。
Taiwan people were thrown into the battlefields, but they were not qualified to be soldiers. Instead, they were called associate military personnel or military laborers based on the ranking of soldier, military dog, military horse, military pigeon, associate military personnel, and military laborer. They ranked last.
其实就是帮助日本人，等于是做杂役的这样的人呢。
In Anping, Tainan, He Yisheng, a descendant of Quanzhou migrants, became a member of the first batch of military laborers. It was 1937. He Yisheng was 19.
当时是安尼啦，日本迄部队来啦吼，4、5个来啦，来找，就是林尾巴啦，安平就是林尾巴，迄是龟里头啦，部队甲咧林尾巴讲啦，即摆要欠命人啦，是林尾巴啦。 伊是讲要做工课，总啊讲，若要做工课，我南边自己个，总啊讲伊讲好，安好，总甲带咧，转去区公所，区公所伊名簿册啦吼，名簿册个，是讲係安尼，查甫个要个安尼要，头摆叫伊调去，200口包。
4 members from the 2 generations of the He family were picked. They were very pleased. They thought they had found a great job.
伊唔知是要去做电线呢，唔知是要去做军夫要电线呢。
Uniforms were issued the night before departure. Then they realized, as military laborers instead, they were heading for the front line. Feeling being fooled, He Yisheng wanted to argue with Lin Babao, but it was too late.
那个电线，咱全天人讲，伊日尾白有人唔敢答应，伊要拍死人。 我拍死，我才去到下路来要甲拍落遮呢。伊唔知影啦。
In late September of 1937, as the Songhu campaign was fiercely fighting, the first batch of Taiwan military laborers arrived in Shanghai, 850 altogether, including roughly 200 Anping folks who were scammed and abducted. In Anping district of Tainan, over 400 people were recruited as military laborers and sent to the Chinese battlefield. In 1939, He Yisheng and his group returned to Taiwan for retraining. They came to Anping Cemetery. 12 of He Yisheng's military laborer companions were buried here. The eldest one was 50 years old, while the youngest one, named Hong Qingshan, who just graduated from a public school, was merely 17. On October 2nd, 1938, in front of the Governor General's office in Taiwan. Military laborers called Taiwan Agricultural Volunteer Corps were holding the flag-giving ceremony. In the names of Taiwan Agricultural Volunteer Corps, or Taiwan Special Public Service Corps, and Special Task Force of Taiwan, they were mobilized to battlefields in China and Southeast Asia. They were called Whole Warriors.
这是阮俩在种菜，这是你军营的头前在桥那边的，这是我本人，因为我7岁就无老爸啦，13岁毕业了后就叫人欺负啦，无前途哦，所以我才去参加这个台湾特色农务奉公团，才过去菲律宾去种菜。 所以讲种菜实在去做这个部队的后援，咱就台湾的去做后援。当时要去，我厝因遮就有一个在爱我的啦，唔敢来送我，徛因兜迄路人遐按流目屎，我无度过怎么来就去做这个军属。这个大胆这喊来。 咱就是无经过训练啦，走看通来味话啊！阮走吼，迄日本人偌歹，你走拢叫啊！来，拜日咱拜几日吼？拜几日吼？即摆拜2日吼？会巴我巴你，你巴我，若伤细啦吼，迄日本的兵就对，你就搁甲你战落，你才会当拍对面大咱安尼，拍甲安这拢会行个啦，讲。 后摆看你要搁惊，阮有拍甲叫唔敢。
你这跑你有怨叹无？
袂安怎怨叹？你无法度啊，伊在管咱的啊，伊在管咱，伊边管，阮是军属啊，毋是边咩文属股啊，日本啊，做军属军属。
Huang Chunlin served as a military laborer and was sent to Southeast Asia in 1941, when a popular love song, Longing for the Spring Breeze, was refilled with Japanese lyrics and renamed as Japanese song, The Earth is Calling. It had literally become one of the most popular conscription songs. From 1938 to 1945, the Hengchun Public Hall had experienced numerous occasions of such seeing soldiers off scenes. These photos of military laborers from Hengchun were passed down by Li Guilan's husband, You Baoshan.
在军营所，他的工作是庶务课，是从事这种有关兵役啦、有关总务啦、事务这些事情，是很重要，而且是很机密的。
The county chief valued You Baoshan's performance very much. However, the latter got into trouble in 1941. The cause was very simple. It has something to do with the school in Taipei.
早阮是读迄个读海南工业学校的啦，迄学校啊毕业去一个桂林庙服务的。
In 1941, 16-year-old Xie Tianzhu was fortunate to be admitted to Taipei's Tuonan Industrial School. That school was among the top-ranking, and it was called Incubation Center for Opening Up Nanyang.
我要去读迄个学校时，爱名目图上面爱写个身份证明啦，是。要测时，这有保险有挑战啦。
You Baoshan had always been hardworking, but no one knew why he was negligent on this matter. The case was immediately reflected to the school and reported to the Governor General's office.
日本的啥，总统府的内底事务总长呢，总督落来就伊安尼，伊就是证明是，你测到，你唔免去税这有保险，直接税军长。
Obviously, it was predictable. While the county chief held him accountable, You Baoshan was frightened. A good citizenship certificate was issued within minutes. It testified the great importance the Governor General attached to talented persons. Of course, they were in demand by the Great East Asia Sacred War. Xie Tianzhu finally went through 1 year of intensive training. After graduation, he became a military laborer and was sent to Bali Island, Indonesia. Hundreds of his Tuonan schoolmates also went there.
我伫南庙捌咧拍棒，迄个中间桥边啊，甲迄个袂行哦， 迄死伤率比平啊较低啊。嘛片了臭臭瓦计就是一个人嘛是碰到像有遐大就是剩只骨头啊伫遐啦。
Xie Tianzhu's service unit was the medical department of the 2nd Garrison of Bali, and his position was medical assistant. In this capacity, he had to regularly contact with some special women and check their bodies.
慰安妇哦，有慰安妇哦，有6个迄个韩国人，韩国查某。
Based on statistics, during World War II, those who were forced or lured by Japan to serve as military prostitutes were the so-called comfort women. Among them, 200,000 were from the Chinese mainland and 200,000 from Korea. Had this tragic fate happened to Taiwan locals?
敢咱台湾去？
有那6个，迄6个查某拢是去着外国听无？日本人咧先去好福啊。
你敢知影台湾什么所在的人？你敢了解？
我敢若了解者伊名，伊迄个艺名，讲朱某妹。朱某妹。台北迄个板桥的。哦，啊板桥的是感觉我，哎哟，哦，想煞想着故乡，讲哦，会想着故乡。
想着做咩？你敢知影即6个慰安妇吼？你台湾即6个慰安妇啊吼，伊的生死啥你敢知影？
唔知。
The whereabouts of these 6 comfort women from Taiwan are still unknown. If Xie Tianzhu doesn't know, I'm afraid that no one will ever know. According to scholars, during World War II, around 3,000 Taiwan women were forced to serve as comfort women. After the war, they hid themselves as an underclass and lived miserably. Finally, the Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation prompted a group of survivors to stand up and allow them to regain their dignities.
你山你战争呢？你战争抬死一个人，敢抬死只狗遐的咧？
食啥饭倒脚甲阮扑你啥，也无互阮食饭安尼哦，然后甲阮糟蹋安尼。
起码迄种甲骨头甲敲下去，敲这个塌下去，现在骨头也没有这样。
日时啊就是合苹果，暗时啊就是树干。
那他们当年在受害的时候，年纪都还非常的小，像这位原住民采访美阿嬷，她那时候才13岁，到营区里面去帮日本军人打扫、洗衣服、煮饭，可是被强暴及被迫提供性服务。台湾最高龄的慰安妇，吴秀妹阿妈，她在2年前去世。检查身体的时候，就是要求他们把衣服全部脱光，然后站成一排做检查。在那个天窗上爬满了其他的日本士兵，你可以看他的眼睛，其实往上一打开，就看到其他士兵的这个脸庞，所以这段记忆一直是阿嬷非常不堪的一段回忆。这是我们另外一位在卖椰子的陈桃阿嬷。他也曾经试图要自杀，喝消毒水自杀，可是没有成功。那回到台湾之后，他的婚姻也是一样是不顺遂的，然后也没有办法生育孩子。其实阿嬷一直有很大的心愿，是如果有一天他能够念书做一个老师，那当然这也一直只能是一个梦想。这是卢奶奶阿嬷。前夫是因为他的身份后来离开他。这是阿嬷的珍藏的一个镜子，这是他之前前夫送他的，后来这镜子破碎，他就用他的方式把这镜子这样再贴补起来。然后这是黄阿桃阿嬷，我们都称呼她是大桃阿嬷。那她是台湾第一位愿意公开露面的幸存者，当年也是20岁左右，他在台北的万华看到一个征护士的广告，所以他去应征。那等到了南洋，他才发现原来他要做的不是护士的工作，而是做慰安妇。
我那个片开始看来哦，开始看来啊，我年纪轻会跟我安尼来可怜，实在他不想好。我每次讲，我后来看不起，50几年，我就在痛苦，妈妈。
成为阿嬷他们出来之后，最重要的目标就是觉得日本政府应该对这件事情有一个正式的道歉跟赔偿。可是他这整个诉讼陆续的都是败诉，那当然这样的一个结果对于这些阿嬷而言是一个很大的伤害。
While their soul and flesh was badly destroyed, in Yilan County, an entire girl, Sha Yan, was trapped in another dark hole. In September 1938, Japanese teacher Takita was enlisted to join the army. 17-year-old Sha Yan and several youths were ordered to carry his luggage. When they crossed a single log bridge, Sha Yan stumbled and fell into the rapid stream. An accident was blown up and kept being blown up afterwards. In April 1941, the Kominka movement had entered to the devotion of royal subjects to the public movement stage. Governor General Kiyoshi Hasagawa solemnly presented the Sha Yan bell. Well covered with an aura of patriotic girl image, Sha Yan's devotion to the public and obedient practice as a royal subject was transformed into an excellent publicity material.
1941年，日本发动太平洋战争，为了协助他们的增援要到南洋作战，所以透过电影他们就用满映，就找最好的导演，就清水纯，最红的那个女明星李克兰、李香兰，通过最好的阵容来把拍成一个，营造一个很凄美、很悲凉的一个爱国的时代故事悲剧。
This poignant movie was fully funded by the Governor General's Office of Taiwan. The filming location was specifically selected in Wuxi, where Mona Rudao led the city's anti-Japanese battle 12 years ago and died in the battlefield. The originally innocent mountain girl Sha Yan was politically transformed into a mature woman with the consciousness of loyalty to the motherland. She even fell in love with her Japanese teacher and encouraged him to go for the courageous expedition. Finally, she sacrificed her life for the country.
这个片子在1943年就开始全台湾放映，在像校歌一样，天天放这个阿拉西呼基猫，就一天到晚就放这首歌给他们听。啊，几乎台湾人大大小小都是。 几乎能够耳熟能详，几乎可以倒背如流。
The film was sent to minority tribes for screening, even in remote villages with inconvenient road systems.
那时候原住民部落普遍教育都很低，啊，他们看到，我们泰雅族的少女沙燕这么勇敢，我们这里怎么可以不为这个天皇去那个？所以纷纷就是从军，他就到那个仁爱乡，就放给当地人看。大家一个晚上之内，就我知道，光在仁爱乡的那个清流部落，就几乎全村的年轻人都登记。
Xu Minggui, a young man from Wuxi's Renai Township, participated in the filming of the movie.
因为他之前有拍过那个少用之中的片子，然后他就是要去从军的潜力片，他们就派去参加拍摄。
After a day of shooting, Xu Minghui followed his unit to the Pacific island of New Guinea. His team was called the Takasago Volunteers, which was solely composed of Taiwan's mountainous minorities, since the Japanese army were not suitable for fighting in the jungles of Nanya Island. They repeatedly suffered losses. Consequently, those mountain ethnic minorities of Taiwan who were good at climbing in mountainous rocky jungles were logically favored and armed as regular soldiers. To encourage them to fight bravely, these people were praised as jungle tigers.
丛林族虎多勇敢什么啊？不用出汗，不要怎么，就是给他们就是说一个蛊惑，让他们忘了生命的存在。
他的哥哥还有他爸爸也是一样，都有去参加，都没有回来，就是死在战场上。
原住民参军是6000多人，回来台湾人不到3000人，几乎。 以台湾的那个族群来比例的话，死亡率是最高的。
但是没演那个部落去当日本兵，那时候只有2个回来，啊。 一个是他的老公，一个是他的哥哥。
Gawa Doyama was lucky that her 2 loved ones could come back alive.
他说他以前去当兵哈，给那个炸弹，都在他就去医院那边治验，好了就回来。
Her husband Gao Jingjia fought for Japan and suffered from injuries. In post-war compensation, Gao Jingjia was forgotten.
但是不知道是什么原因。
刚好对他先生回来之后，也没有得到1毛钱赔偿，所以他们后来觉得也很万谈啊，就是说被殖民，然后被利用之后，就是等于就是说。 弃之如敝屣，跟他破鞋子一样把它丢掉。
In 1995, the 75-year-old former Takasago Volunteers member Gao Jingjia passed away. But even after he was back to his Lord, he could not rest in peace.
他们确实很可怜，这辈子因为没有国家保护，因为台湾割让给日本，变成无祖国保护。 所以任人家予取予求，要杀要宰就随便他们，所以他们常常讲说，身为台湾小面积，台湾殖民地人民是很悲哀的。
Based on statistics from Japan, in World War II, they mobilized 207,183 troops in Taiwan.
总计在20万左右投入南洋战场。依我去靖国神社调查，有关。 台籍不管是近乎日本兵，死亡名单上面是28000名左右，登记有案的，在我们台湾的统计上，应该是有超过5万人以上失踪或死亡的，超过5万人。
Hengchun, a southernmost town of Taiwan, from 1938 to 1944, within 7 years, had dispatched batches of soldiers to South China and Nanyang Island.
拢伫这个迎春的这个西门外遮，拢伫遐送，送军务，大鼓小鼓身后壁，热路分这个分吹。伊这个军务若照阮这个网衫吼，照阮网衫有出去的这个人吼，大家其中的阵即马转来的阵来，敢若朱金英呢。
大家敢若倒来一个呢？
倒来一个呢。 别种我唔知啊，阮种哩6个出去一日倒来呢，一日倒来呢。
我的老爸，这个蔡成，阮调去做军务。我听阮爸爸讲，我7个山海里调过南洋的啦。我干阮爸爸换名转来啦，阮爸爸换名转来就是讲。 伊伫遐算这7个人，伊骨头伊拢甲压一块啊吼， 早伫身躯边个，若上山落海要过桥坐船，伊拢发叫。
我伫南洋5年，阮的庄仔伫遐死250个啊。安尼是有严重甲无严重你知？当时吼要安怎讲啊？受了伊的教育啊，嘿，你就袂当人讲受讲遐有诶无啊。
阮第4、第5、第6、第7，咱一直刷咧，阮拢嘛送伊去到高雄港。哦，你送到高雄港？拢送到遐，送到高雄港出去，啊，有诶去拢都无转来啦。对不起，大家。
Pictures of Hengchun military laborers' expedition and departure in 1938 were found 70 years later in the house of You Baoshen's wife, Li Guilan. In 1942, You Baoshen also served as a military laborer and went to the Philippines. He left these photos to Li Guilan before his departure. There was a photo of him and his adopted daughter. He and Li Guilan had had their own daughter, but she had only lived for 8 months. She died from Hengchun epidemic cerebrospinal fluid. They especially cherished and spoiled this weak adopted daughter. As for Li Guilan, his wife, You Baoshen was deeply sorry for her. After 5 years of marriage, he did not bring his wife a good life. A few months earlier, due to the failure of raising funds for their aquaculture farm business, his family was in dire straits. In order to pay off the debt and support his family, he decided to serve as a military laborer in exchange for money. 28-year-old You Baoshen bid farewell to his wife and daughter with military songs in the air and set off to the Philippine battlefield. We will be awaiting them. In the days of praying for her husband's return, Li Guilan, being alone under the light at midnight, lived a difficult wartime life with her daughter. In 1944, she encountered the bombardment of Taiwan by the Ally. She was unfortunately burned by the incendiary bomb and disfigured. Her young-looking appearance lost its beauty forever. Her dreams as a young girl had all vanished. She was supported by her husband's sporadic remittances and letters throughout the rest of her life.
去到南洋的时候，他经常有来信的，因为感情不错，他也惦记着我那个女儿啊，怎么样啊，状况怎么样啊？到了台湾光复以后，就没有消息。
There was no news at all about You Baoshen. Their daughter grew up and got married. Still, there was no news from You Baoshen. Finally, there were rumors that You Baoshen was still alive, but he had another marriage and settled down in the Philippines.
也啦是安讲啊，我是讲若有命就好，安怎拢袂要紧啦，有命就好啦。
In 1988, after parting with You Baoshen for 43 years, Li Guilan got the exact news that You Baoshen died in the Nanyang War. You Baoshen was not listed in the deceased in Japan's Taiwan military laborers roster. Li Guilan has never received any war compensation from the Japanese government.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ